Officer follows puppy to an empty house and makes a discovery that will haunt him forever. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow I have another beautiful story to share with you, and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's get into the story. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates. More stories are coming, and you won't want to miss the next one. I'll see you in next story. Officer Michael W. Sharpton had spent 15 years burying his past under the weight of a heavy badge and a steady, rhythmic pulse. But the hollow-eyed puppy staring at him from the porch of 412 Blackwood Lane was about to dig it all back up. It wasn't just the way the animal sat, perfectly still, like a statue carved from grief, but the way it looked at him, as if it knew the exact shape of the secret Michael kept locked behind his ribs. The house was the skeletal remains of a Victorian era long dead, its windows shattered like unseeing eyes, and its wood rot smelling of ancient, damp earth. Most strays would have bolted at the sound of a police cruiser's gravel-crunching arrival, but this dog didn't flinch. Instead, it let out a low, mournful whine that sounded less like a bark and more like a name being called from a great distance. Michael's hand hovered over his holster, not out of fear of the animal, but because the air around the porch felt heavy, charged with the kind of static that precedes a life-altering storm. He had come here for a simple animal control call, but as the puppy dropped a rusted, familiar object at his feet, Michael realized he hadn't been called to this house to serve a warrant. He had been summoned to face a haunting. The mid-afternoon sun was pale and weak, failing to penetrate the thick canopy of overgrown oaks surrounding 412 Blackwood Lane. Officer Michael W. Sharpton stepped out of his cruiser, the gravel crunching under his boots like breaking bone. The house was the skeletal remains of Victorian architecture, condemned and forgotten. He was there on a nuisance call. Neighbors reported a stray dog barking at all hours. On the porch sat a puppy, small and honey-colored, with eyes that held a piercing, human-like intensity. It didn't growl. It didn't run. It simply stared at Michael, its head tilted as if it had been waiting for him specifically. "Hey, buddy," Michael muttered, reaching for his radio. "I've got the stray. Send animal control." But as he spoke, the puppy stood up, its gaze fixed on the heavy, padlocked front door. The puppy trotted toward Michael, but instead of seeking a pat, it dropped something at his feet. It was a small, rusted object. Michael knelt, his joints complaining, and picked it up. His heart skipped a beat. It was a metal toy soldier, a paratrooper with a chipped green helmet. Michael's thumb traced the jagged edge where the soldier's rifle had snapped off 20 years ago. He had a set exactly like this. He and his younger brother, Leo, had played with them the day Leo vanished from their backyard. Michael felt a cold sweat prickle his neck. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. The puppy barked once, a sharp, demanding sound, and slipped through a broken panel in the front door. Policy dictated he wait for backup. Logic told him the toy was a coincidence. But the knot in Michael's gut told him he was finally standing on the edge of the truth. He drew his flashlight, the beam cutting through the interior gloom. The air inside the house was thick with the scent of wet wood and ancient dust. "Police! Anyone inside?" Michael's voice echoed, swallowed by the peeling wallpaper and rotting floorboards. The puppy was a golden blur at the end of the hallway, sitting patiently by the kitchen door. As Michael moved, the floorboards groaned. He noticed something strange. The dust on the floor was undisturbed, save for his own heavy footprints. There were no paw prints. In the kitchen, the puppy wasn't looking for food. It was frantically scratching at a specific corner of the linoleum floor, its tiny claws making a frantic scritch-scritch sound. Michael pushed the dog aside gently and used his tactical knife to pry up the loose flooring. Underneath lay a set of keys attached to a leather keychain. Faded gold letters spelled out Sharpton. Michael's breath hitched. These were his father's spare keys, the ones that had gone missing from their kitchen counter the same week Leo disappeared. The puppy looked up at him, its eyes reflecting the beam of his flashlight, and whined, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief. The dog turned and bolted toward the basement door, which hung slightly ajar. Michael followed, his pulse hammering in his ears. The stairs were treacherous, half-rotted and slick with mold. As he descended, the temperature plummeted. The basement was a labyrinth of old coal bins and discarded furniture. The puppy led him to the far back wall, a space obscured by a heavy, rusted water heater. The dog began to howl, not a puppy's yip, but a long, mournful wail that vibrated in Michael's chest. He shone his light on the wall. The drywall here looked newer, the seams poorly taped, as if someone had tried to hide something in a hurry. "Move back," Michael ordered, though the puppy had already retreated into the shadows. He delivered a heavy kick to the center of the wall. The cheap board gave way with a sickening crunch. He kicked again and again until a hole large enough to crawl through was formed. Behind the wall was a hidden crawl space, no more than 4 feet high. As Michael leaned in, the beam of his light landed on a row of hooks. Hanging from them were items that looked like a macabre collection of trophies: a child's backpack, a single sneaker, and a tattered jump rope. Michael's light shook as it landed on the final hook. Hanging there was a small, navy blue school jacket. He reached out with a trembling hand and turned the collar. Stitched in white thread, in their mother's neat handwriting, was the name, Leo Sharpton. The boogeyman of his childhood hadn't been a monster under the bed. He had been a neighbor. This house belonged to a man named Silas Vane, a quiet recluse who had died in prison on unrelated charges a decade ago. Michael sank to his knees, the weight of 20 years of guilt and what-ifs crashing down on him. He had found his brother's final resting place. The sound of sirens finally approached, red and blue lights strobing against the basement's small, dirt-streaked windows. Michael Sergeant Miller came charging down the stairs. "Sharpton! You okay? We got the call about the break-in." "I found them, Miller," Michael said, his voice thick with tears. "I found all of them." He turned to point to the puppy, the little guide who had led him to justice. "And this dog, he showed me." Miller looked at the corner Michael was pointing to. He looked back at Michael, his expression softening into one of pity. "Michael, there's no dog here. There hasn't been a living thing in this house for years. Look at the dust, man. You're the only one who's walked through here." The excavation of 412 Blackwood Lane took weeks. The remains of 6 children were recovered, bringing closure to families who had spent decades in the dark. On the day the house was finally demolished, Michael stood at the edge of the police tape, watching the claw of the crane tear into the roof. As the dust settled, he felt a warm pressure against his shin. He looked down. There, sitting in the grass, was the honey-colored puppy. This time, When Michael reached down, his hand didn't pass through air. He felt soft fur and a beating heart. The puppy licked his palm, its work finally done. Michael picked the dog up, tucked him into his patrol car, and drove away from the ruins of Blackwood Lane. He wasn't just an officer anymore. He was a man who had finally been led home. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates. More stories are coming, and you won't want to miss the next one. I'll see you in next story.